Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to Coconut Chronicles, a coconut's diary through South Africa. Welcome aboard on this podcast. I'm Rita.
And I'm Abby. Thank you for introducing us this episode. Well done.
Thank you so much. Guys, welcome back again. We're doing this a third episode. Can you believe? Oh my
No, I
word.
actually can't believe it.
It's quite crazy. Once again, we're going to be diving nicely deep into coconut juicy stories, if you could say.
Yes, brace yourself for this topic.
Literally. There's actually a little bit of a disclaimer in the middle of this. But obviously, first, we need to sum up what this podcast is about. Abs, can you tell us, darling?
Yes, I would love to. This podcast is for coconuts by two coconut aunties. We really want to start a community and just open up a discussion around being a coconut in South Africa. We want an open channel of communication, experiences, good or bad, different perspectives. We really want to explore this topic from all angles, and we just really want to invite you to be a part of this conversation and realize that we really want to give you guys a platform as a community.
Absolutely. And as you guys know, you guys can obviously subscribe to this YouTube channel. You can find full episodes here on YouTube at Coconut Chronicles ZA. And then we obviously have our socials. On TikTok, it's Coconut Chronicles. We just started on Twitter. Be nice over there.
Yes. We know shade gets thrown.
Girl. And also we've got our Instagram page also that's just been launched. So find us on all of those socials. Again, Coconut Chronicles ZA. It's only on TikTok that we have Coconut Chronicles on its own. But find the full episodes and join the club. Hit that notification bell. Grab a coffee. We're about to get into some nice juicy stuff. And our topic, let me get it in. Our topic for today is called Coconut in School. Exactly that.
Yes.
I mean, there's just so many stories. There's so many experiences, guys. You guys are really going to need to, chime in. I think it's fully a discussion that we need to have for obviously just a bit of a note. We do have a disclaimer for this video.
Yes, viewer discretion is advised.
Yeah.
In this episode, we will be discussing topics such as bullying, discrimination, bigotry, and we just want to give a trigger warning to everyone. And I hope that you will continue with us in this episode.
Absolutely. Okay, girl. I hope you're comfy over there.
Ooh, hot seats. I don't know about comfy.
I mean, as comfy as we can get, honestly. But now kind of kicking off into our first question. Madame, let's start at the beginning. Ne? What was your educational background in South Africa?
I don't know if I just want to catch viewers up. I am adopted. I've got the classical coconut story.
Yeah.
And I was adopted into quite an affluent family. Initially, I actually went to a government school, and I don't think people actually realize that because it was just such a short period. At the time, my niece was going to a private school, and my family felt that my parents had the resources and access to send me to a better school. So it was very short-lived that I was in a government school. And I just remember growing up in the northern suburbs of Joburg. I did not have a lot of exposure to black people outside of domestic workers and people in employments of servitude. And I just didn't have exposure. I mean, I didn't have colored neighbors. I mean, and people of color in my neighborhood. I just hadn't been exposed to that. And I think in the government school initially, it was the inverse of predominantly colored people, people of color, and the minority was white school. And I definitely remember my mom kind of encouraging me to hang out with the white kids. And then my experience of entering the private school, it was just like, this is your first day of school. It wasn't a focus on who you should hang out socially. It was just like, this is your first day of school. And I just remember, I think that definitely did contribute to me as a coconut and kind of being encouraged and conditioned to realize that I'm white and this is where I belong in that culture. And I do think that definitely influenced my experiences.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite a nice in-depth answer, darling. On my side, I'm just going to really give you a guideline, if you could say, of just, what my background has been. So, as you guys know from the first episode, I grew up or was born in the Eastern Cape. So, grew up in Port Elizabeth, suburban, also similar to yours, suburban background, private school. And that was from, you could say from grade 1 until grade 4, 5. I have to backtrack my mind here, and I'm not telling you my age. I've said it again. It's not
21.
forever. So yeah, that was my kind of first kind of chapter, if you could say. Then going into moving from there. So I've moved around. I've moved through 3 provinces. So I've got 3 kind of backgrounds here that I could share on just what my school experience was. So yeah, as I said, first one was Eastern Cape. Then my second one was Cape Town. So I moved to Cape Town from grade 5 until grade 8. Grade 8, grade 9. And I mean, yeah, it's going to take day and night to kind of unpack on how that was. But there are differences between the two. I definitely also had the only black girl kind of experience for a little bit. So definitely in Port Elizabeth, that happened for at least like from grade 1 until grade 3-ish. I think I only had like from grade 3 to 4 a little bit of more of of my people in the same room. It's specifically in my class. I'm not going to say in the entire school. Yes, there were black people in the school, but they were not always in the same grade. They weren't always in the same class as me. So it still was kind of like isolated, right? And then in Cape Town, also that same kind of experience. So obviously from 5, 6, 7, it was obviously a little bit more mingled, multicultural, more colored, more Indian, more, just a lot more of us kind of mixed in. And then I think in terms of the clickiness, I can definitely go into that as we go
I was
further.
just about to say, Cape Town and clicks.
Cape Town and clicks, man. It's a thing, okay? Yeah. And they really can't lie about it. It's there, right? You're not running away from this. Cape Town, we're here. Pointing a finger at you for that. So that was a thing. And now going into Joburg. So Joburg was my last stop. So that was from grade 9 until 12. And that was like a complete culture shift. That was like a real, what's this? You're clearly not from Joburg kind of a thing, kind of experience. I'm a coast girl, a coastal chick. And that was, what's this? A lot more influenced with, I guess, the monetary value, if I could say.
What do you mean by that?
Like, do you have the means? Do you have like a financial upbringing?
Sure, I'm actually surprised by that. I thought that kind of attitude would have been more prolific in Cape Town than Joburg.
Girl, you'd be surprised. So when I say monetary value, I mean like, do you have the lifestyle? Do you have like a more affluent lifestyle? Is the very big pickup when it comes to Joburg compared to any other province that I've been at. Look, Cape Town can sometimes be considered another country. Okay, sometimes.
That's fair.
I'm not gonna what's this, run away from that. But when it comes to Joburg, it was definitely like, do you got money? That was like the very apparent, difference of what brand are you wearing, what, all of those. Yeah. So those monetary value things, I don't know what the English word is for that, but that was definitely the stark difference that I experienced. Then going into snobbery, going into which hood are you from? Joburg people are very prideful of where they come from, as we all know. Right. But it's a thing of that was the difference. So as a sum up, I can say that was my background. And then going into our second question, darling. We're going to go deeper, hey? I hope everybody's holding on. Can you answer for me, Abs? Do you think the education system protects coconuts?
No, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm going to speak to follow up here in not only just my own personal experience, but just what I have actually witnessed. And I think what's so shocking about this is that this happened 10 years. This was happening 10 years after I left school. And I think you expect that, you know, I'm a new generation. This is just, maybe it's a new system. Maybe it's people are still testing stuff out and you trying to think, you know, these things are going to be eradicated by now. So I was fortunate enough to meet a very influential South African young woman who was part of a movement that was quite widely covered by the media at the time in South Africa. And I just remember her being this absolutely stunning, well-spoken, brave, intelligent woman. I mean, she was a teenager at the time, but she just had such maturity beyond our years, her kindness, and I mean, you don't captivate an entire South African nation for nothing. And I remember I got the opportunity to speak to her, and I found out that we had been attending the same school, but just with a 10-year difference. So just in my mind, I was just like, oh my goodness, it must be such an amazing experience to be a part of this progressive movement, to really be leading the way in the setting an example, you know, standing up for Black women. And she said yes, but unfortunately, I mean, these things are still kind of pervasive. And I was just like, what do you mean by that? And she said, you know, well, there's these rumors being attacked at me, and it's quite common. You know, things were being said like Black girls smell like baboons, they behave like baboons, they're looking like baboons.
Excuse me?
Yeah. And when I heard this, I know this is not what you're meant to say, but I kind of made the assumption that this came from, you know, the classic example of a stereotype of South African racism.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I kind of found out that these remarks were actually predominantly coming from Black students. And at the time, even parents, because, you know, she was young, there were parents at where I met her, her parents just acted like this was normal. Like, you know, what do we do? This is just so normalized in the school. And at this point, I just realized just how pervasive the psychological bullying was, because this girl, I mean, this absolutely stunning girl, so intelligent, doing this amazing thing. You would think that people were elated, especially women. And this is, I went to an all-girl school, and I couldn't believe it. I was just like, surely not. 10 years later, what?
That's
and
insane.
Just to think that the education systems were not sticking up for her. Parents knew about it. They were trying to know what to do. And I mean, if someone of that high stature can get treated like this, imagine students without that influence.
Yeah.
They would get
Just
away with absolutely anything.
girls. Yeah.
So I think that's why I say no. I've experienced it for myself. I've seen it, and I've seen it 10 years later, after the fact.
That is insane.
Yeah.
So that's a very profound no. The answer
As
is,
you can tell, I definitely stand by that.
yeah, there was clearly no protection for that. And I mean, that's just a devastating fact. I'm not even going to say story, because that was an experience. And I think this is what, you know, what we're trying to do on this podcast, right, is really spotlight, right, the realities of it. I think, you know, from this isolating experience of being a coconut, already just, you know, in whatever space that may be, and now kind of going to like your more whiter spaces, right, if I could say, you would think that, oh, perhaps the coconut is just where they need to be, you know, oh, they fit right in wherever they are with their little white accents, you know. Come to find out that, you know, no matter what kind of touch of Black you might be, right, whether it's a drop, whether it's 50%, 30, 75, Black is Black, right? And it has the same reaction, like, across all.
I think just to speak to your point is that, yes, she was Black, and you would think this is an amazing opportunity in that representation. But I think also what contributed to that was the fact that she did speak, she presented a certain way, and I don't think that was held in high regard. And in our previous episodes, we've spoken about how speaking a certain way can actually lead to discrimination, and people not wanting you to present a certain way and not represent the community in the way that they want you to, and just the devastating effects of that punishment as well.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So I think it seeps through the cracks.
It really does. And hey, we're going to talk about it. We're not going to shy about it once again. As you know, the Coconut Chronicles way of doing things. We're going to expose it. We're going to be vulnerable here. And I think even as we go into, I guess, more in-depth questions, this is where, I really do hope people can actually resonate, right?
Yes.
Compassion is needed for these kind of topics. And yeah, let's make the table bigger once again.
And I just wanted to ask you, have you seen this experience? Do you believe the education system protects coconuts in your experience from what you've seen?
I don't think so. You know what? I'm going to agree with you here. Like, it's really a no. I think the educational system can try to support coconuts in staying a coconut, if that makes sense, depending on which kind of background you come from. So I think with government schools, and I really do hope we can get as a guest here to also speak on that background, because one of the things that I remember quite very clearly is that my parents really didn't want me to go to a government school. Like, they were like, it's the last of the last options, because they were so worried that discrimination is going to be high. Like, Matt, you think government schools? Like, here I thought, Mom, I can go. Like, I'll be fine over there. And my mom literally refused. She was like, there is no way that's happening. By the time I was like in middle school, because I think in Joburg is where I wanted to like try, something different. I was just like, government, not even government, but like, is it your Model Cs? There's so many terms for these kind of schools. So, half government, half private, whatever those mixes are. I just thought, let me just try something outside of private, just to see. And obviously that didn't happen. Stayed in the private school, and the only kind of answer I could say is that it didn't provide different outlooks, right? If I could say it just from my experience on how else coconuts could be treated. But I do think from a government school, I think it could have been very different. But for privates,
Sorry to interrupt. It's actually really rude of me. Sorry. But just, I actually just love the point that you just made, that in coconuts being sent to private schools, there's this misconception that they're going to be protected.
Yes.
And that's the environment for them. And we kind of fed that's where they're belonging. And I think that also kind of enables and abets the bullying, because people overlook it, because it's just like, is that really the truth?
You'll be fine.
You'll be fine. You're over-exaggerating. Like, it's not that bad.
It's not that bad, You
just want attention.
Yeah, you're going back to a suburban home. Like, you'll be okay, right? Yeah. And it's really exactly that. Like, point made. It's not. And I think, it's being kind of, is it shielded in the private school factors or whatnot? I think the only takeaway is that it did feel like I couldn't break out of this mold being a coconut as much as I wanted to. And that's technically what I kind of wanted to try in high school. I wanted to, to see the other side, like maybe this, I'm not going to use certain English words here just for my sake, because the mind is gone. English is English, no matter who's speaking it. Do you understand me? Like, sometimes I'm just going to have some words in my mind. I'm like, I'm not going to use that today. But I think when it comes to, like, staying in a certain identity, people are going to, like, literally take it as it is. Like, it's going to be such a struggle to really kind of break out of it. And that's really what I wanted. So there's a downside to being supported as a coconut. And then, as you're saying, you're not going to really be protected. It is what it is. And that was our experience, and no one can take that away from us, truly. These are facts, and we're going to go into even bigger facts in our next question. Let's go into it.
Yeah, wow. In your experience, have you experienced discriminations for being a coconut from peers and or teachers in your school? Sorry. Plural.
Oh, plural, yes. Schools, peers. I mean, as I said before, I have got quite a mixed masala of experiences traveling from, the Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and then Gauteng in general, just having those three mixes together. There are some highlights, darling. But I feel like they're not as rich as yours, I must say. I think you've got definitely a richer context when it comes to the experience of a coconut in school. I've got a lot of experiences outside. Oh, girl, we can go into all the juicy stories, and we will for this season. But then when I have to think about school, I'm like, yo, now I must go back to my brain and say, you need to remember what happened at this point. And the one point that I can actually remember as an experience is when I was in Cape Town.
Okay.
Funny enough, because I think when I have to, just touch on from Eastern Cape, as I said, it was isolated, right?
Okay.
Cape Town, that's when I started really integrating into a more cultural kind of group, if I could say. And that was specifically my high school experience, so grade 7, 8, right? And for some odd reason, when I go back to this experience, I actually can't remember what the reasons for this person to treat me in that moment in that way, right? But I do remember how she reacted. I do remember that I felt extremely awkward. I felt like, what's going on? I'm confused. Is there something wrong? And let me go into it, right? I mean, that was just a highlight. Now we're gonna go really into the story. And as I've said, it's in Cape Town, so literally my grade 7 and 8 class. She was actually a grade higher, from my understanding. This girl, she basically had a fit. Let me just sum it up, because I was a coconut. She said it out loud. Like, she said it like, oh, this coconut. Oh my gosh, oh, you're such a coconut. Like those kind of expressions. And for the life of me, as I said, I can't even remember what even happened, because I think I was asking a question about something. It was an after school activity. I did a whole lot of sports, right, growing up.
As to be expected in school, to be encouraged.
Right. So I literally took those up, and from what I can literally gather, because like I have to literally piece the story even for myself. Perhaps it's a trauma response. Who knows?
I was just about to say, it sounds like
Right.
Yeah.
And I was with like a couple of other students. There was actually a black guy with his Asian girlfriend at the time. That's what I remember very clearly.
I just wanted to ask, just to give
Yeah.
context, was the person that was having the outburst what?
She was a black girl.
Oh,
Yes. So, and that's quite an important point of it. And I think we can obviously go into, which racial group has discriminated us the most, right? In this coconut experience of school, of high school, primary school, whatever segments of that. But yes, it was a black girl who was in a different grade as me, from what I remember. And she was in a higher grade. It was some sort of after school activity. I think we're just hanging out for some sort of thing. Like, I literally, for the life of me, girl, I'm serious, I literally can't remember what we were doing. I don't know if it was after a school event and we had to like pack up something, or like kind of go through some sort of program. But I remember it was like literally after school. It was a little bit late, and I had to ask her a question about something. We touched base on a few conversations, I remember, before then. So she wasn't a friend or anything, right? Okay. Just for context. She was just in a higher grade, and we just had to do something together after school with a few other people. And I asked her a question. I remember that very clearly. And she just lost it. She just, coconut. That was her response. And I was like, huh? The confusion on my face. I was like, is there something wrong? Like, I didn't understand. And the black guy in that room with his Asian girlfriend, he was just like, can we calm down here? Like, I remember him being like,
so he was trying to be
the peacemaker,
the mediator.
And I think I even asked her, like, what does that mean? I remember I was so confused. She was like, oh, she's such a coconut. Oh my God. And I think that was like the first time I actually was like addressed with that title. And I was like, what's that? Like, what are you saying? Like, I was like, I'm so confused. And the guy, he was like, oh, it means that, but I don't know why. Okay, let's just calm down. Like, even he was a little bit like lost at words, like.
So he was just trying to diffuse
and
shame.
There wasn't really like a good reason. Like, if I had to look back, I'm like, why did you say that? What was the reason? What is the need for that term as well? Because I think I was just asking a very like, oh, what is this? What is that? And obviously my white accent, I think it's just triggered whatever emotion she had. And that's one of the highlights that I do have. Like when it comes to a very stark moment of, oh, Rita, you're a coconut, oh, you're different, and even just from, I could tell from her cultural background, she was from the Kasi. This was the Kasi girls, and she came here through scholarship. I remember that for a fact. And I was just like, oh, okay. Differences, I think from classism, differences. I didn't even take it as personally at the time. I just remember being very confused, but very on the spotlight right then and there, that there was something wrong. And that there was something wrong with you. that was made apparent. So I think I can take that.
It's still disappointing just hearing how you're describing these events. You would expect a senior class member to show a little bit more maturity, to kind of take you in under her wing. Well, I mean, like you said, she was an acquaintance, but I do think that if you're the older one in the grade, you know what I mean, you would expect a level of maturity and just
you would
like control and just a little bit of
none of that,
restraint.
And I do remember the issues of because if I had to like kind of look back now, literally this conversation is bringing back a little bit more of a memory, is that I knew that I couldn't relate to her as much as like, at the end of the day, we're two black girls. Like, what do you, like, we're always going to be a part of the same group, okay? That's how school is. Like, we're always going to be categorized together. So I never had any feeling of, oh, I need to put her in that group. Like, but I think having that conversation right then and there, and her pointing out that you're a coconut, oh, there's something wrong. That's when I was just like, oh, there is a difference between you and I, clearly.
So you were thinking from community, you were both like, we're going to stick up for each other, there's no different, and then it's just completely...
Thing. Yeah. So classism is really a huge thing in my school experience. That's what I've had. Apart from being a coconut, I know that you have a more richer take in terms of literally as a coconut, but classism, having this white accent, having the mannerisms, you could say, of that were just obviously a little bit more, I guess, what is it, Western, if you could say, stood out in my experience. But being called that wasn't a norm.
I just want to ask, I know we want to get into my story and just those kind of things, but I hadn't actually thought about this before, but I really wanted to ask you, was this kind of behavior ever reported? Was it repeated? Was it just overlooked?
It was a once-off. It was a once-off. If I had to... Actually, I think I strayed away from actually talking to her that much.
Okay.
I really do need to, kind of go through my details. But because obviously I moved from Cape Town going into Joburg, so it was a short-lived thing.
Okay.
Even though I had my crew, I had we definitely weren't in the same kind of same groups, if you could say. I think we really were just forced to hang out with each other because of whatever school activity it was, right?
Well, that's a blessing in disguise, I believe.
Technically,
I think it could have gotten a lot worse.
Yeah, I mean, she was, and it was so slight. It was so like, oh, you're this, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember being like, interesting, because her character, I do remember this part. Hallelujah. I remember a part of this is that she had a very shy demeanor. She came off as that. So that's why I was so shocked to being like, you didn't even have much of like a volume in your voice, and then all of a sudden you're gonna express the disdain of me being a coconut all of a sudden and just really show that you're not here for me. And that's all good, man. I mean, like, it is what it is. But I think from my perspective, that's one of the memories that I have. Now I'm going to pass the baton to my dear friend Abby. Darling, do you have any stories? Did you experience discrimination as a coconut?
With baton.
Baton?
Yes.
You know what? I have a different English.
Each other. Don't worry, we tease each other. This is normal. I
have a different English, okay? I've got a more of a broken English. Yours is definitely a lot more poshed up, my darling. It's a lot more cleaned up, okay? I've got 2 African parents. It comes through, okay? But tell us a story, darling.
So I'm just going to give a little bit of context before we get into the specific scenarios of the first situation that I experienced. Because in the previous episode we spoke about this, I was fluent in Zulu, I was weaned off English. Couple years later, you have the option when you're going into high school to pick languages.
Yes, I remember.
So you either, as a secondary language, could choose Afrikaans, English, and unfortunately at the time, I didn't actually realize this was an option before it was too late, but French was an option as well. And I think my parents felt a lot of guilt around not allowing me to speak an African language, and I think they were really starting to actually see the repercussions of that because I wasn't fitting in with the black kids, and I think they wanted that, that hero arc of redemption.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad saying, "You will take Zulu." It wasn't even up for discussion, and he kind of packaged it as, "This is an amazing opportunity for you to connect with your language." And he kind of, in a way, I don't think this was the intent, but he kind of put it on me to be responsible for that. Like, this is your opportunity. You need to do this. So I just kind of went with the flow. I didn't have any options. I mean, your parents are your parents. They get the final say. And I started taking Zulu. And I distinctly remember there was this one male Zulu teacher who treated the different aspects, different racial groups in the classroom very differently. So I remember at the time, white kids were revered as these hip, cool, progressive kids for taking an African language when you could have taken Afrikaans. The black kids, it was an easy A. The curriculum at the time hadn't been modified to account for fluency in other languages and how that can overlap into Zulu and things like that. So the curriculum was coming from a perspective of you learning a second language. So it was an easy opportunity. A lot of them cross-culturally could understand Zulu very well. And it just became an easy A. They were very easily integrated into the classroom. Everything was fine. Whereas for me, I kind of noticed he started doing this prejudice, snarky kind of behavior towards me. And why I'm bringing this up is because he didn't do this with the white kids. If he had done this with equally me and the white kids, you could kind of argue the point that maybe he didn't want to share his cultural language, maybe he felt the white kids were being a bit phony, because technically I fall into the category under a white kid.
Yeah.
And I just remember in his lessons, his comments started to get more and more snarky. And I started to believe, am I imagining this? I started gaslighting myself. I just kept telling myself that, no, I'm overreacting. I'm being sensitive. Like, maybe it's not that bad. Until there was this event where he could not back out of those accusations and that behavior, because it became extremely stark and apparent. It was after school the one day. We had all finished our assignments, handed them in. I think there was probably about 10 minutes left to the class. So he says to everyone, you know what, you guys can relax. I'm just going to go quickly pick up some papers, keep it down, don't do anything, I'll be back soon. So as all teenage girls do, I think I was probably around 16 at the time, we all pull out our phones. We're all chatting, we're all relaxing, we're all on our phones, everyone's doing their own thing. He comes back into the classroom and all of a sudden he flies into this fit of rage. Like, he is just like, who said you could be on your cell phones? Like, what is going on here? And I distinctly remember he initially confiscated quite a few people's cell phones. And then a white student started crying, so he immediately gave her back her cell phone. The black students in the class kind of were just like, but you said we can relax. We kind of, I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
He gave them back their cell phones. He looked at me and he refused to give me back my cell phone. He absolutely refused. He said I was in the wrong. I had violated the rules. I was being disrespectful. And in me just trying to defend myself and to say, I don't understand, like, why am I being accepted? He immediately took that as a sign of disrespect. I was challenging him. I was being disobedient and disrespectful. So he immediately went and said, I'm permanently confiscating your phone. It's going to the principal's office. And I remember when I got home, I was just so confused about everything because everyone had been on their cell phones.
Why were you isolated?
And I spoke to my guardian at the time, who was a psychologist, and just to actually bring this up with the principal, how are we going to get the cell phone back? How are we going to come to an
Amicable.
Thank you. See, English can fail both of us.
Girl.
Like conclusion to this, and
Yeah.
I remember my sister had, she said to me just from the story when I was explaining the situation, she said, "You're going to have to apologize." In this meeting with the principal's office, this is a very proud man. He does not like to be embarrassed. He does not like to be confronted. You are going to have to apologize. So I went into the principal's office, everything was set, I just apologized, and I felt like an idiot, like an absolute idiot. Like, why
were you apologizing?
Why was I apologizing? And I remember on his face when I apologized, he had this smirk of entitlement, like, oh, now you can get yourself in there. Yes, of course you were in the wrong. Like, this behavior won't happen again, will it? And I just remember the arrogance on his face, like, you owe me. And I also remember the school positioning it and kind of saying, you know what, this is just a misunderstanding. This is just a miscommunication. Don't worry about it. And I realized in that moment that the school was more concerned about appearing racially integrated and progressive than actually upholding those values.
That's insane.
And like, who was going to support the claim?
Yeah, exactly.
As a student, you don't want to challenge authority, and I mean, I was going to still have to be in his class.
Yeah.
So
you're a good kid, technically. Like, you don't want to be
that's what I was also
attacked. Yeah.
and it took me, like, now that you're saying it, it took me years to actually realize this, that as a school, if a student comes in with this massive misconduct, if they have never shown any other misconduct, no strike to the record, I was such an obedient school kid. I was scared of everything. Like, I was not going to be stepping out of line.
Across that you
I
were just
didn't-
being led. Yeah.
I didn't have any misconduct, and it wasn't like this, oh, the troublesome student again with the attitude. It came out of the blue,
Jeez.
and they still didn't actually say
That's so traumatic. I'm
and
so
will
sorry.
investigate any further. So
Yeah.
that was just my experience with a Zulu teacher specifically. I have had other wonderful teachers as well who had tried to help, but unfortunately I'm going to get into a little bit of the darker side with the peer bullying that I experienced.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning of high school, you know, you want to fit in, and we have spoken about on this channel that you kind of float between these two groups. You don't fit in with the white kids, and you don't really fit in with the black kids.
Yeah.
And I just remember when I was at lunch with the black kids, they spoke their native languages, they spoke African languages, as they should. And if you think about it, they did not get a lot of opportunity to actually speak the language.
Exactly. So they're using the opportunity as much as they
They
can.
can. And I just remembered at the time when I was hanging out with a certain group of white kids, they almost felt like this entitlement to look down on me. And I actually experienced experiences, and one girl is progressive in this story, but this is just an example. I remember we had these massive grounds. There was lots of space for everyone to sit around and do this kind of stuff. I remember these two girls kind of came up with this game where they would sit on the bench and I would sit on the floor if I couldn't run to the bench fast enough. I wasn't athletic. I wasn't any of those things. And I just remember the one day I couldn't take it and I walked away. And that was probably around grade 8. So that was like the first indication of this kind of behavior just being normalized, and I just got to a point where I just couldn't take it. So I just was like, okay, perhaps these aren't my friends. But then again, you're in this isolated situation where you're floating between groups. You don't have a support system. So you kind of, I think because I felt like I didn't have a support system, I was just like, let me stick with my friends. You know what I mean? Like maybe I was being sensitive. Maybe, maybe I was overlooking things. And I just remember this one girl's bullying got worse and worse and worse over the years. And I remember she had this very smart manipulation tactic. What she would do if anyone confronted her in any kind of way, she would just burst into tears. She wouldn't even defend herself. She wouldn't say it. She would just burst into tears. Because immediately, regardless of whether her actions were true, they were... people had seen it, they don't want to attack someone that seems like a victim, because then they look like a bully as well. So that was her favorite go-to card. So as the years progressed, I just realized within my own circle of friends, I was being bullied within my own circle of friends.
Oh my word.
And no one was doing anything about it. And I remember at the time there was another girl that could be classified as a coconut that enabled and abetted and kind of supported this bullying campaign and didn't say anything. And if you look back, and I think with hindsight and, you know, a lot of introspection, with a lot of
English.
reflection as I've gotten older,
Yeah.
I don't particularly blame her, because she was literally watching how she would have been bullied if she had not complied.
Oh,
And as a teenager,
my God.
realizing what happens when you don't have a support system, you become a very easy target. And I think that's what people underestimate about being a coconut, is that if you do not have a support system around you, you become the easiest target.
Red dot.
Because you're going to be classified as being oversensitive, as there's going to be all these racial things that are brought up, and who wants to be associated with that? So no one's going to defend you, and especially with her victim, she's got the upper hand in the story. So, and I remember this went on for probably about 4 years, progressively worse.
4 years.
4 years.
Abs? What?
By the time matric rolled around, I had just completely withdrawn into myself. Teachers were starting to get a little bit concerned. They were just like, we're kind of seeing really reclusive, unhealthy behavior. And I just became so isolated because I want to fit in. I
want to be accepted. Yeah.
Friends. And just, how do you explain to your parents that your friends are bullying you? And I went to my legal guardian at the time, and but this had been happening for already 3 years at the time, and I distinctly remember her saying to me, you know, you're adopted, like, what possibly could you be upset about? Like, you've got this beautiful life, like, you know what I mean? Like, and I remember the look on her face was just like, excuse me, don't embarrass me, don't say that. Like, that doesn't fit the narrative of the happy adopted child. And I just realized at the time, by the time it had just gotten so bad, and, you know, no one wanted to defend, support, whatever, I was just completely alone. And I think the school didn't support. I tried to report the bullying to my parents, guardians. They were just like,
You got to toughen up. Oh well.
I didn't have friends to support me. And it was just one of the most isolating experiences.
Oh my word.
And it led to severe depression, severe anxiety, because I had to keep up facades. I didn't know how to defend myself. How do you defend someone who thinks they're a victim who's actually a bully?
Yeah.
And a person that's going to support and enable the bullying because they're too scared to get attacked as well. And at that point, it just felt hopeless.
Oh my word.
And to think that this was happening with so many people watching and just saying nothing.
I'm so sorry, babes.
Thank you.
As you've heard, we've gone into quite in-depth answers on just the realities, right, of discrimination against coconuts in school. And I'm sure you're asking, why did we bring this to the table? Why we're talking about this? I'm sure just even from the stories that we put through, there's obviously just a harsh reality, right, that we wanted to spotlight. And I think we can touch now on just the key takeaways. What are you guys going to take away from this? Abs, you want to touch on that?
Absolutely. I think when we were, researching this topic, and often when we think of topics that we want to talk about, we want to say, why is this important?
Yeah.
Why do these stories need to be shared? And with this one, I actually haven't specifically spoken up very honesty about it. I think there was a lot of shame and embarrassment around it, and I didn't want to put my family in a harsh light. And I think it felt like I was almost betraying them in a way.
Girl.
And I think this is a reality. Sometimes you are going to need to be your biggest supporter and foster a level of self-love that is unfathomable.
Absolutely.
Because there are going to be extreme moments of isolation, unfortunately, in this experience. And this is what I'm talking about. I don't want it to get to the point of how isolated I was and how alone I was. I want to encourage people to create connections and networks and support systems so that they have people and trusted support systems that they can confide in, can share in, who will defend them, who will justify their realities and not overlook them. And I think, I know that was a very harsh time, and I just want to remind everyone that high school is a bubble. It's not going to last forever.
Absolutely.
I'm so grateful for my varsity experience because I got to meet different people.
Absolutely.
It's not the end of the story. Yes, it is a side part of the story, but it is not the whole story. And I just really want to highlight that if you are feeling alone and isolated, don't forget that this is just one chapter. I have met so many amazing people. I met my best friend in varsity shortly after, of 11 years, who is also a coconut. I have other very dear friends to me that have supported me and have believed me, and when I spoke honestly about it, I was met with so much compassion. I realized that it wasn't something to be embarrassed about. Being a victim of severe bullying was not my fault.
We need to repeat that again. It was not your fault. Hello.
And this is why I wanted to educate, especially in the education system, because I think, if I'm going to be honest, that was, I think, one of the most hectic points of just neglect at that point. And I want to highlight this so that we can learn better, do better from what I've learned, and just actually realize the severe need for this. Because I think it's one of those things that, like we spoke about a little bit earlier in this episode, that it's overlooked, and too many assumptions around being a coconut are made, and then they blanket darker realities and experiences instead of giving coconuts a safe space to feel they can connect and be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add on that, honestly. I think, what I want to validate, right, especially to our viewers out there, like, if you're a coconut in the high school experience or experiencing any kind of discrimination, right, even if it's racial discrimination, I mean, we can really, be inclusive in this. We see you, okay? As Abby said, this is not going to be your whole life. Okay, it's actually a short-lived experience, as what's this, as hectic as it may be, right? It feels like it's going to go on forever, but it won't. There's an actual full stop to it. We just want to encourage you, as we've said, find that support system, find that self-love place that you can create for yourself, whether it's at home, whether it's in whatever other community. Like, there needs to be some sort of space where you can actually pour into yourself in a healthy manner. And it's really going to help you push on, keep on. But ultimately, we want to just also spotlight, like, hey, coconuts, get together. Like, don't be in this very isolated space of, oh, woe is me. There's no one out there. Like, no, put up your hand. Say, hey, like, let's meet up. Make the effort. Step out in stride. If you're not finding the people, they might obviously reject or whatnot. Like, keep it moving. Don't focus on that. You're gonna find your people. Is what we really want to encourage you for. Even if it's at the end of the road of grade 12, even afterwards. Even if it's after varsity, you're gonna find your people. You really are. And yeah, I think in terms of where you can find us, as you know, please tag us at Coconut Chronicles ZA. Join the family, subscribe, hit the notification button. Is it button or bell? I don't know. The button. And yeah, thank you so much for watching.
Also, just to add on, in the comments, we always say this in all our videos.
Yes.
This is a community of respect, support, and kindness. And what we will also be doing is that we will be linking some resources for anyone that is going through anything that is struggling. We do want to just put those links in the resources. And I think the final message is support can break cycles.
Yeah.
It really can.
Yeah.
And there's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing about support. It actually can do miracles. And it has, and I can testify that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We'll see you in the next one. And it will not be this hectic, we promise.
We'll try and get onto a lighter note after these after these ones. Anyway, guys, we'll see you later. Check you out.
Bye.
Bye.